In the ever-changing landscape of African politics, one name has increasingly commanded the attention of global leaders, analysts, and ordinary citizens alike: Ibrahim Traoré, the youthful leader of Burkina Faso. Rising to power in 2022 at just 34 years of age, he became Africa's youngest sitting president, taking the reins of a country long plagued by political instability, economic hardship, and security threats. In the years since, his bold vision, uncompromising stance on sovereignty, and defiance of global power structures have propelled him into the spotlight as a figure not only of national renewal, but of continental transformation. Now, in 2025, whispers have grown into headlines. Could Ibrahim Traoré, the revolutionary leader of Burkina Faso, be nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize? And if so, what does this signify for Africa, for the international order, and for the meaning of peace in our time? The possibility of Traoré receiving such recognition may seem shocking to some, yet to others it feels like the natural culmination of his extraordinary journey. For decades, the Nobel Peace Prize has been awarded to leaders, organizations, and activists who, in one way or another, sought to advance peace, justice, and human dignity. Often, these choices have been lauded as moments of moral clarity. At other times, they have been criticized as politically motivated or premature. Against this backdrop, the prospect of a 30-something African leader, largely unknown outside the continent just a few years ago, rising to the ranks of global laureates is nothing short of remarkable. It forces us to reflect on what kind of leadership the world truly values and how the definition of peace itself is evolving in the 21st century. Traoré's rise was born out of crisis. Burkina Faso, landlocked in West Africa, had endured years of turmoil following waves of jihadist insurgencies that spread across the Sahel region. Villages were attacked, lives were shattered, and entire communities displaced. Citizens grew increasingly frustrated with governments that seemed either powerless or unwilling to protect them. It was in this climate of anger and despair that a young military captain, Ibrahim Traoré, stepped forward. His promise was simple but radical: to restore dignity, security, and sovereignty to his people. Unlike other leaders who took a cautious, diplomatic approach, Traoré adopted a defiant stance, openly rejecting the influence of former colonial powers, particularly France, and turning instead to regional alliances as well as partnerships with Russia, China, and other emerging powers. This defiance became the foundation of his appeal. Where many African leaders are seen as proxies or products of foreign patronage, Traoré cultivated an image of authenticity, determination, and courage. For millions of Africans, he represented a new generation of leadership unafraid to challenge entrenched systems of exploitation. It was not just about Burkina Faso. It was about the broader African struggle for true independence, decades after the flags of colonial rulers had been lowered. This narrative of sovereignty resonated deeply across the continent, from Mali to Niger, from Ghana to South Africa, and even beyond Africa's shores. Yet peace is not built on rhetoric alone. If Traoré is being considered for the Nobel Peace Prize, it is because his leadership has produced tangible shifts in Burkina Faso's trajectory. Under his watch, major investments in security have begun to push back extremist forces that once seemed unstoppable. Communities that had been abandoned are gradually being rebuilt. But even more significantly, Traoré has combined the restoration of security with a bold vision for social and economic transformation. He has launched initiatives aimed at self-sufficiency in agriculture, calling on citizens to reduce dependence on foreign imports. He has championed education reforms, insisting that Burkina Faso's children must learn not just from imported curricula, but from the history, values, and aspirations of their own people. He has pushed for resource nationalism, arguing that Burkina Faso's gold and other minerals must benefit Burkinabe citizens before they enrich foreign companies. The Nobel Committee has often rewarded leaders whose peace efforts transcended the boundaries of their own nations, influencing regional or global dynamics. By this measure, Traoré's case is compelling. His example has galvanized other leaders across West Africa, particularly in Mali and Niger, where juntas also seized power amid similar frustrations with corruption and insecurity. Together, these countries formed what they call the Alliance of Sahel states, pledging mutual defense and cooperation, and signaling their rejection of institutions they deemed compromised, such as the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS. While critics decry this alliance as undemocratic, supporters hail it as a bold step toward regional sovereignty. In effect, Traoré has helped birth a new geopolitical bloc that challenges the dominance of both Western influence and extremist forces, potentially laying the foundation for a more stable and self-determined Sahel. Critics, of course, are not silent. Some argue that awarding a Nobel Prize to Traoré would be premature, even reckless. They point to ongoing human rights concerns, reports of heavy-handed tactics by security forces, and the absence of democratic elections. They warn that celebrating a leader who rose through a military coup could set a dangerous precedent. After all, the Nobel Prize is not merely a recognition of aspirations, but of concrete, sustainable progress toward peace. Skeptics argue that it is too early to judge whether Traoré's policies will lead to lasting stability, or whether they will simply entrench authoritarianism under a new guise. Yet it is precisely here that the debate grows most interesting. What does peace mean in a region ravaged by violence, where conventional democratic structures have repeatedly failed to deliver security or prosperity? Is peace the absence of war, or is it the presence of justice, dignity, and sovereignty? Traoré's defenders argue that his leadership redefines peace not as a fragile truce imposed by external powers, but as a durable framework built on self-determination. To them, his Nobel candidacy is not about endorsing every decision he has made, but about recognizing the broader movement he embodies, an Africa that seeks to reclaim its destiny from both terrorists and foreign exploiters. The international reaction to the possibility of Traoré's nomination reveals much about the shifting global order. In Western capitals, opinions are mixed. Some policymakers fear that rewarding Traoré would signal a tacit approval of anti-Western sentiment, emboldening other leaders to reject old alliances. Others, however, quietly acknowledge that stability in the Sahel may indeed require strong local leadership, and that Traoré's model, however controversial, has produced results where years of foreign intervention failed. In Africa, by contrast, the excitement is palpable. For many, the idea that one of their own, so young and so unapologetically African, could stand among Nobel laureates is a matter of immense pride. It would not merely honor Traoré as an individual, it would affirm the legitimacy of Africa's struggle for true independence in the global arena. As we reflect on the trajectory that has brought Traoré to this moment, it is important to recognize the symbolic weight of a Nobel Prize in 2025. The award has long been criticized for Eurocentrism, for failing to adequately recognize African contributions to peace. Only a handful of Africans have ever received it, and fewer still have been young leaders with their political careers still unfolding. Awarding it to Traoré would mark a decisive break from tradition, signaling not just recognition of past deeds, but faith in a future yet to be written. Moreover, Traoré's potential candidacy underscores the generational shift now underway in Africa. With a median age of just 19, Africa is the world's youngest continent. For too long, its leadership has been dominated by aging elites, some in power for decades, disconnected from the aspirations of their youthful populations. Traoré, by contrast, embodies a leadership that speaks the language of young Africans, impatient, daring, and unwilling to accept the old compromises. His rise suggests that the future of Africa will be shaped not by leaders clinging to the past, but by those willing to imagine a radically different tomorrow. Still, the path forward remains uncertain. Burkina Faso continues to face enormous challenges: poverty, climate change, fragile institutions, and external pressures. Traoré's boldness may yet prove to be his undoing, as entrenched interests both within and outside his country resist his reforms. The Nobel Prize, if awarded, could amplify his platform, but it could also intensify the scrutiny and expectations he faces. The story of Ibrahim Traoré is not yet complete. It is still being written in the streets of Ouagadougou, in the villages of the Sahel, and in the hearts of millions who see in him a mirror of their own hopes and frustrations. Whether he ultimately receives the Nobel Prize or not, the fact that his name is even being mentioned in such circles is already a victory of sorts. It signals that the world can no longer ignore the transformations underway in Africa, nor dismiss the continent as a mere backdrop for global struggles. Ibrahim Traoré has, through his words and deeds, forced the world to pay attention. And that, in itself, is a kind of power that transcends borders and institutions. If the Nobel Prize is indeed meant to honor those who challenge the status quo in pursuit of peace, then Ibrahim Traoré's candidacy is not shocking at all. It is rather a reflection of the profound shifts taking place in the global South, where voices long silenced are beginning to speak with clarity and force. Perhaps the true shock is not that Traoré might be nominated, but that it has taken so long for the world to recognize the leadership emerging from Africa's youngest generation. As the months unfold and the Nobel Committee deliberates, the world will continue to watch Burkina Faso with keen interest. For Traoré, the journey ahead is fraught with obstacles, but also rich with possibility. For Africa, his story is more than the tale of one leader. It is a reminder that history is not static, that power can be reimagined, and that peace itself must be constantly redefined. And so the question remains, is the world ready to acknowledge not just the struggles, but the aspirations of a continent rising from centuries of exploitation? Is it ready to honor a leader who dares to dream beyond the confines of imposed borders and imposed systems? If the answer is yes, then perhaps the Nobel Prize in 2025 will not merely honor Ibrahim Traoré, but will stand as a symbol of Africa's long-awaited renaissance.